Hi, this is Mrs. Allison. Today we are going to look at using trigonometry or trig to solve for missing angles. Yesterday you looked at how to solve for missing sides. Hopefully you remember the mnemonic device that video showed you that was SOHCAHTOA. And that just reminds us that the sine is the opposite, that's what the O stands for, over the hypotenuse. The cosine is a ratio that represents the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And then the tangent is a ratio that represents the opposite over the adjacent. Okay. So what we're going to look at today is how we can use that for solving for angles. And here's how that looks. First thing we're going to do is we are going to look at the triangle and look at the angle that we're trying to find. And in this case, we're trying to find this missing angle right here. And what we're going to do is we are going to label our triangle. I'm a big believer that we should always label our triangle based off of the sides and the angle that we know. So for example, if I look at the angle and I notice that across from it is the 50 degrees, this side will be called our opposite side because it's opposite of that angle. So I'm just going to label it OPP as an abbreviation. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to notice that across from the 90 degree is my hypotenuse. Remember, the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So we are going to call this side the hypotenuse, HYP. And notice I have no information about this side right here, which is right next to the angle. Therefore, it's called the adjacent. So I'm not actually going to use the adjacent at all. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to set up my trig ratio much like I did in the videos yesterday, or that were done in the videos. So here's what I know. I know that using the opposite and the hypotenuse means I'm going to be using my sine, my SO part of my SOHCAHTOA. And so I'm going to do the sine of the angle, and we're going to call that angle whatever variable you'd like. I'm just going to put the question mark because that's what's there. So sine of this question mark is going to be equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. And my opposite is 50, and my hypotenuse is 52. So this represents my opposite, and this represents my hypotenuse. So sine is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. So the sine of the angle equals 50 over 52. Well, in order to get the angle by itself, which is what I'm trying to solve for, I need to undo the sine from that angle. This isn't multiplication, so it's not like I can just divide by sine. I need to undo it. So think about operations. Addition and subtraction undo one another. Multiplication and division undo one another because those are called inverse operations. So what we are going to do is we are going to use an operation called the sine inverse. So what it looks like is I am going to do the sine inverse, and inverse has this little -1, of both sides of my equation. So it looks like this. So I'm going to take the sine inverse of this side, and I'm going to take the sine inverse of the right-hand side, and I'm going to put it in parentheses, 50 over 52. Oopsies. Let's see if we can erase that. 50 over 52. And what happens is the sine inverse and the sine undo one another, meaning they cancel each other out. So what I am left with on the left-hand side is just the angle I'm trying to solve for, that question mark. So that question mark equals the sine inverse of 50 over 52. So let's look at how we type that into our calculator. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the second button and the sine button because above the sine button is that sine to the little -1. Then I'm going to put parentheses and I'm going to do 50 divided by 52 and hit enter. This actually works on both the TI-84 and the scientific calculators. I'm going to do the same process. So second sine, which gives me my sine inverse, 50 divided by 52. And then I get that this angle is equal to 74.0, let's round to the nearest hundredth, 06 degrees. So I just solved for my missing angle. So let's try another one. Again, I'm going to write up at the top SOHCAHTOA just so we can have that mnemonic device always handy. I would say it's a good idea to keep that written at the top of your paper just to remind yourself what each of the trig ratios represent. So let's look at SOHCAHTOA and let's look at what we've got. So I'm trying to find this angle right here, the one with a question mark. And I know that this angle points to this side 12. And that means that side 12 is going to be called my opposite. So I'm going to abbreviate that OPP. And then I know my 90-degree angle points down to this side. Well, I don't actually need to know this side. This side isn't going to help me much with this triangle. So then I need to think about what this side is. And the side next to the angle, right next to it, is what we call our adjacent. So I'm going to abbreviate that ADJ. That's my adjacent side. So I have the opposite and the adjacent, and I'm trying to find the angle. So which trig ratio, sine, cosine, or tangent, uses opposite and adjacent? It's the tangent. So we are going to use the tangent, and here's how we set that up. We would say that the tangent of the angle that we're trying to find, which we don't know, we'll call it the question mark, the tangent of the angle is equal to the opposite, because my SOHCAHTOA tells me it's equal to the opposite, so that would be 12, over the adjacent, that's what comes next, and my adjacent happens to be 27. So I'm just going to make a note here just to remind you that we're doing the opposite over the adjacent. That's what tangent tells me to do. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tangent inverse of both sides. And so when I do that, the whole reason we do that is to undo the tangent from the question mark. That was meant to be an equal sign. I'm going to undo the tangent from both sides. And what that does is this tangent inverse and this tangent cancel out, which leave me with just the question mark equals, then I'm doing the tangent inverse of 12 over 27. Now, anytime you are solving for an angle, you are going to use the tangent inverse, that little -1. So type that into your calculator. Do second tangent button, so you get the tangent with a little -1. It opens a parenthesis. We're going to do 12 divided by 27. And what we should get is that question mark, that angle is equal to 23.96 degrees. We're going to round to the nearest hundredth. Hopefully that helps you in solving for missing angles. I'm going to post this video on my YouTube site, which I'll have your teachers be able to look at. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. Have a good day.